there's a big difference between understanding where our capabilities are based on experience so far versus putting a boundary on where those capabilities may go. And if we have an open mind and some understanding of how we're naturally wired, that helps us to find a path so that we can perform and contribute in a way that is consistent with our biggest gifts.
Hello and welcome to the Mind Your Leadership podcast. I'm Karen Tsuk. In today's episode, our guest is Louis Gump, President of Cambian Solutions, where he drives excellence in innovation, business growth, and team performance. Louis brings a wealth of experience, having served as Senior Vice President and General Manager of Cox Media and CEO of NewsON and LSN Mobile. He's also led groundbreaking mobile businesses for the Weather Channel and CNN. Louis has played pivotal roles in industry organizations like the Interactive Advertising Bureau, IAB, and the Online Publishers Association, OPA, and served over a decade on the board of the Mobile Marketing Association. He's also the author of the book, The Inside Innovator, a practical guide to entrepreneurship. In this episode, we'll explore how to lead change within large organizations and create value through innovation and growth. So stay with us. It's going to be really creative and interesting. So Louis, it's great to have you on this episode. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome, and thank you, Karen, for having me.
So Louis, you have had an impressive career journey with significant roles in various innovative companies. Can you please share a personal story or an experience from your career that has profoundly shaped your approach to leadership and innovation?
Yes, I suppose the one that comes to mind for me often is the experience of launching the Weather Channel's iPhone and Android apps at the same time, roughly, in the fall of 2008. And it comes to mind for me for several reasons. The first was that it seemed like an impossible task around 6 to 8 months before, when we had not seen the code for either operating system, and we did not have the resources immediately available. And so we had to work through that as a team. And yet we knew that this could be the breakthrough moment for our company after working for a number of years to build a strong mobile business. And so what we found is there were several keys. The first was that we had already invested in the capabilities to develop products, even though we didn't know exactly which ones would come in the future. Next, we decided to divide into teams in a way that we had not done before, with some internal development and some external development. And lastly, we relied closely on our partners to make sure that we understood from a development perspective and from a launch perspective how that would work. And when the apps launched in November of 2008, that was really a landmark time in our business. And we built apps that ended up reaching tens of millions of people and were some of the most downloaded of all time.
Amazing. So what I hear you say, actually, the ability to connect to the broader picture, to have a diversity of opinions and voices, and connect in a deeper level with the people, it enabled you to achieve this creative goal. Am I right?
Yes, that's exactly right. I entirely agree. And one thing that I would point out is that we had some of the capabilities in place, even though we couldn't have predicted, a few months or years beforehand exactly how they would be used. So when you set up a system that is friendly to and capable of innovation, then you have more options when the opportunity presents itself.
Which capability? Can you give as an example of a capability that you used?
Sure, absolutely. In fact, beginning in 2001, we saw the future for apps in the mobile space. And we also saw that we would need technical infrastructure so that we could send weather data and information to a variety of places. And so in each case, we started growing, and we grew from very small. We only had a handful of people dedicated to this in 2001. And then we built a generation of apps with technologies called Java and Brew and Windows and Symbian. And then we said, okay, that actually worked. And we started generating some revenue. And then around 2003, 2004, we built capabilities for video. So we had another layer of innovation capability. And then around 2005, 2006, we built mobile web using XHTML and similar technologies. And then we came around to apps again. And at that point, we had, the capabilities in a variety of places to deploy as we needed them.
So you actually integrated all the capabilities that you had, and you didn't know in advance that you will use them in order to have this leap of creativity. Interesting. I want to go forward with the question and ask you if you can explain how would you describe the key differences between intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship, and how can recognizing these differences help businesses foster a more innovative environment?
Yes. So there are several differences that become really obvious really quickly after you look at this topic for a while. One of them is the scale and scope of the larger companies versus the smaller ones. One of them is the processes used for decision making. And one of them is the resources that are available to you as an entrepreneur versus an entrepreneur. And I'll take those in order. If you have scale and scope, let's say of a large multinational, what that means is that if you have responsibility for a smaller venture, then you're working inside an ecosystem. And you have to do things not only that work for your venture, but also that are consistent with the strategy and the approval processes of the rest of the organization. And there might be 100 people who could say no, and each one of them could stop you. If you're an entrepreneur, typically, you're the founder or owner of a company or both, and you have the ability to make decisions in the event that you have the resources to go in a certain direction. Next, with processes, one of the best ways to stop innovation is to have the same decision-making approach for large ventures, for ongoing initiatives, as you have for startup initiatives and new ventures. And so if, for example, you have a requirement for a certain amount of return on investment, profitability within a specific amount of time, and this is kind of monolithic, that doesn't work really well for an entrepreneurial venture inside an organization. On the other hand, if a company has developed systematically the ability to innovate, then what that means is that they can manage their ongoing business. Let's say they have a mature business and it moves along, grows maybe 3 to 5% a year, and it's very large. That's fine. You can manage it that way, but you have to think differently if you're going to be successful at innovation consistently. And then lastly, with resources, it's not all bad news in the case of being an entrepreneur, because often the entrepreneur has resources like people, like cash flow from other places, like partnerships, like technology. And all of these things can be brought to bear to really bring tremendous benefit to customers. I would also call out one specific aspect of this that's very important. There's no value judgment here. It isn't like entrepreneurship is great and entrepreneurship is somehow different or lesser, or that entrepreneurship is preferred and entrepreneurship is somehow lesser. Actually, they both add value in different ways, and handled correctly, they're very symbiotic.
So yes, what I understand that entrepreneurship is within the organization, and it can be the corporate world. And entrepreneurship, I'm usually the owner. I take the decision, make the decision. I can work within this ecosystem that it's like a broader thing, but it's not in other corporate world. And I want to ask you, from your experience, what are the top characteristics that distinguish a successful entrepreneurship from others within this organization? Let's delve into the entrepreneurship that actually this is the focus of your book, I understand. And if you can explain what distinguishes him from other people in the organization, and how can you identify him?
I'd be happy to. And in my research for the book, I found 16 characteristics with 5 that rise to the top. The first one, and the one that in my experience is always present, is curiosity. just an innate curiosity. Typically, it can also be learned, but typically it's innate. And it's someone who wants to learn and experiment and try things. But that leads to the second one. It's okay if you just want to know and learn, but all entrepreneurs combine that curiosity with an action orientation, at least the successful ones, because it's about finding a way to apply what you learn in a way that benefits the organization and the people you serve. And then in addition to that, you've got several more. One of those along the way is risk tolerance, because an entrepreneur needs to be willing to try things. And if they're going to try things, then it's possible that some things aren't going to work out. And when that happens, what is your attitude? Are you going to value that and honor it and fold it in, or are you going to get disappointed and discouraged? And in general, the most successful entrepreneurs will have enough risk tolerance that they know how to learn from mistakes and fold that knowledge back in. There are several more, but I'll leave it at that for now.
So it's having a growth mindset, right? Continuous learning and learning from mistakes. I think it's the most important thing, to learn from mistake and the experience. It makes sense that curiosity and actionability differentiate them. But I want to delve into another component that we talked before the conversation about self-awareness. I come from the conscious leadership space, from self-awareness, presence. How do you see these variables impact creativity, and what's the connection between them as you see it?
It's critically important, and even more important than I understood at the beginning of my writing journey for the book. As I early on just started writing about the things that I found over time are important for successful entrepreneurs. And over again, I came back to something that was so basic that I almost skipped past it. And that is this concept of self-awareness, because I wanted to go to strategic alignment or building the team or, activating the business. And then I realized, hey, wait a minute. Most of the successful entrepreneurs that I know have a very significant amount of self-awareness. It comes from the curiosity. It comes from the applied curiosity, but they direct it at themselves as opposed to the external marketplace. And when they do this, for example, a lot of the people that I've found who are most successful, let's say someone who's building a business at ESPN, or let's say someone at a wireless carrier who's creating a new ecosystem, or someone at a device manufacturer. What they found is that they operate well inside an environment where they have a fairly large team and they're one part of a much broader environment. On the other hand, some entrepreneurs that I know and have been very successful, they find, hey, this works for me. Some of them say, I just don't like having a boss. And even if they have a chairperson of the board, let's say, on the other hand, they have a lot of decision-making ability. And going back to the point about no value judgment, this is just something where if you know where you work best, then you can be more successful. And then I would add two additional elements. One is people who can do both. And the second one is the importance of listening for self-awareness. First, some people are so naturally wired to be an entrepreneur, to work inside a larger organization, that they would be deeply unhappy with the risk and exposure that comes with entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. Some people who are entrepreneurs would be deeply unhappy if they always have to meet the needs of several other people and maybe 3 layers of bosses. That's okay, no problem. Some people can work within both and find happiness and fulfillment and effectiveness at different times throughout their careers. So, for example, someone can start in a large organization, maybe learn skills, learn from some of the best in the business, and then later on they go to lead their own company. On the other hand, some people have a brilliant idea and this desire to go out and make their mark on the world, and they start as an entrepreneur, and then their company is acquired or they otherwise found themselves in a large company. They can be enormous value drivers. So, and in some cases, people experience both in their career and they're happy and successful. And then I did want to mention, in the spirit of self-awareness and mindfulness, it's easy to get into a conversation where you're kind of listening, but actually you're just waiting to make your next point.
Yes.
And what if instead we make a practice of always listening truly to understand? This is less a revolutionary point than it is a practice that's sometimes very hard to do, even for me. I try to be very aware of this. And sometimes I'm so excited about something that I just can't wait to pitch in the next comment and I miss something important that someone else says. So if someone wants to be truly mindful and self-aware, then it helps to kind of have, a sense of peace inside and a sense of equanimity and respect for other people. And that respect is displayed by listening to others and really understanding where they're coming from. And if that happens, it's much easier to come to a solution which, from an organizational perspective, benefits customers, but also from a personal perspective, realizes your full potential.
I couldn't agree more. Otto Scharmer talked about 4 level from MIT, professor from MIT talked about 4 level of listening, right? So the first level that you talked about, the fact that we are listening, but waiting for the other person to stop talking and bring our assumptions and viewpoints, called the downloading, right? Listening of downloading, because we want to download whatever we came with. We are not really listening. So this is our automatic behavior. We come to the conversation and we want to download what we have and not really listening. The deeper level is coming with open mind, like open the window and really listening to new data in this conversation. Going deeper, it's coming with heart, right? Understanding, being empathetic to the other person. How does it feel right now? And the deeper level, and this resonates with the presence and the mindfulness, is coming with an open will. I'm really coming with an open will to find the right solution, the creative solution, and it can be beyond my assumptions, beyond my viewpoint. It requires us to really be present and listen, first of all, to ourselves and to dare to show our vulnerability and to bring our perspective, and then to be humble and really listen to other perspectives and respect other perspectives, even if we're not in an agreement with them. And the most important thing for a leader is to be able to maintain and to hold this space and the uncertainty and pondering this uncertainty and not to close the uncertainty and the unpleasant feeling that can arise within this. And by holding this space for different perspectives, new wisdom can emerge and a creative solution can emerge. And actually, it's what I found in my research that I call it a dialogue space. And this is a crucial tool for leaders to create creativity and innovation, because from these places and spaces, creative solution can emerge. Otherwise, we are doing the same. So this is what resonated to me when you talked about it. And, I really believe that creativity connects to a deeper wisdom within ourselves. I called my company Wisdom to Lead because I really believe that each and every one of us as managers and leaders has his own wisdom. And once we help people really to connect to this wisdom and to tap into their own wisdom, and as a collective, as a team, we really are tapping together to this wisdom within ourselves, we'll find a solution that apparently will be bigger than each and every one of us. So I think mindfulness and self-awareness is really crucial to create new products and services. Otherwise, we're doing more of the same. What do you think about it?
That highly resonates for me. In fact, listening to you, I made some notes here because I have some research to do after this call.
Okay.
That said, imagine having not just 1 or 2 people who perform in that way, but you actually have a team that performs that way. Imagine the magnifying effect that can have within your organization, within a community, and beyond. And so it certainly resonates. And I've seen it be very important in the innovation space because almost by definition, what you have is an environment where you don't know the outcome. You do have some indications of where things may go. You may even have a strategic hypothesis, and you may have very strong awareness of the trends. However, then it's a very creative space. And sometimes this is the difference between success and failure, but sometimes it's the difference between a pedestrian success and a true breakthrough.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that the ability to ponder and to be in the unknown, it's the most crucial thing for organization to be able to hold and be, because usually when we come to a meeting, we need to have to deliver the results, to find a solution. But research showed that when we put pressure and stress, creativity, our brain gets into the stress mode and flight and a fight, and we're not in a creative mode. And in order to create space for people and place for people to be creative, we need to reduce the pressure and the stress and to give them the space. So, what I advise for leaders that want to figure out a creative solution for the product or service, I offer them to come to the conversation, to the meeting, and in advance say, look, we don't have to get to the solution at the end of this meeting. Only by the fact that you bring this space and time, people will be much more present and focused and much more creative. And in a paradoxical way, maybe even the solution will emerge before the end of the meeting. So it's like a paradoxical, right, between the organization that are driven results and we don't have time, and between creativity. So we need to hold this tension, right, between the space and guidance to play with it in order to enable it to emerge.
That's right. The point has been made many times in many ways that sometimes answers come when you aren't trying so hard, when you're relaxed. And sometimes that does require a break. I believe David Brooks made this point in a book on character, where when he's talking about becoming the kind of person who can essentially be a full manifestation of yourself. Often that happens when you take some time, you relax, you aren't highly engaged and focused on solving a problem or creating a solution. You're just allowing the ideas to flow. And again, there's a magnification effect when you have multiple people working toward the same goal.
That's for sure, yeah. Can you share some specific examples of how entrepreneurs have successfully created transformative growth opportunities within their organizations? Do you have something that comes to your mind? And what lessons can entrepreneurs learn from these examples, from the entrepreneurs? Because as you said, I think you, as a person in your own path, you can be sometimes entrepreneur and maybe move to be entrepreneur and learn from your experience. And connecting back to the self-awareness, I think this is part of being aware of ourselves. Which ground do I need to be creative and to bring my creativity? Do I need this corporate and rules and people around me, or I need to be, ask people for approval for my decision, or I need to go alone and I'm a soloist and I need to do it my own way? So I think it's also part of being aware of ourselves, right? What ground do we need? How do we nourish this creativity within ourselves and bring it to amplification? So I a little bit went south. You can take it, focus back to the question in advance. If you have an example.
Happy to. And actually, I'll use a couple of examples from the book. One is from Leslie Wainwright, and she described her journey within Turner Broadcasting at the time. It's now Warner Brothers Discovery. But she was focused on legal needs, and she was a lawyer for the company. And then she had the opportunity to work on a company that Turner acquired called Bleacher Report. And in the process, not only did Bleacher Report become much better known and much broader and more valued within a larger organization, but also she grew as a leader. And so instead of just focusing on the narrow angle of legal needs, she acted more in the capacity of a general manager. And as she described it to me, this was beyond her capabilities at the time. These were things she did not know. The opportunity and the need and the trust from her leaders resulted in tremendous transformational growth for her. She eventually became one of the most senior leaders within Turner Broadcasting with broad capabilities, not just to ensure that a contract was done correctly, but also sound business judgment. And then she has gone on from there to become chief legal officer of a large sports-oriented company that is very successful in its own right. On the other hand, Quint Studer, who is a successful healthcare entrepreneur, he described to me a story about his dad. And the reason I love this story is because it's less about massive change and it's more about tremendous value inside an organization. He said his dad was a mechanic on diesel locomotives for trains. And he worked within General Electric, which made these locomotives. And he became so good at what he did that he was called upon from places around the country, and they would actually fly him to where the locomotives were instead of bringing the locomotives to him or otherwise finding a way for him to do his job. And what he said is that his dad really, he could have gone and built his own consulting company, and he almost certainly would have been very successful. He had very rare skills. But on the other hand, he wanted the safety and security of a larger organization, and he wanted to take care of his family. And he wouldn't have been able to sleep very well at night if he had had all the exposure. And so he found tremendous success, not in something that found its way into a press release or a big splash on the homepage of Axios, but rather he found his success in doing his job so supremely well that he was one of the best in the world.
That's amazing. And it circles back to what we talked before. As I said, I think part of being creative and an entrepreneur is understanding what the conditions I need in order to thrive, right? So I need to know myself and to know what I need in order to thrive, which environment I need. So we need to start with this. And the second thing that I heard from the first story, it's actually trust the process. Trust myself, trust the process, and things will unfold. When you want to achieve a product or creative solution for a service, we don't know how it will unfold, but we really need to be able to, as you say, to listen deeply to the environment needs, to our community, to our customers, and really see how it unfolds, and maybe sometimes pivot, change, embrace the growth mindset, and be open to experiments, right? Because it's an experiment. It's not a linear thing. Okay, this is the solution, let's go. It doesn't work right like this, right?
That's exactly right. And trusting in the process makes a lot of sense to me. And also this trusting in yourself, even when we have reason for doubt, because I think most of us will find it's very human. In fact, it's helpful in some ways to have awareness that we aren't always right. Mm-hmm. It's also helpful to be aware of where our capabilities are at a point in time. But there's a big difference between understanding where our capabilities are based on experience so far versus putting a boundary on where those capabilities may go. And if we have an open mind and some understanding of how we're naturally wired, even if it's with a Myers-Briggs or a Berkman, just some sort of assessment so that we know how we respond to given situations, that helps us to find a path so that we can perform and contribute in a way that is consistent with our biggest gifts.
So two things come to my mind. First of all, it's humble. And you talked about to be humble and to understand that we don't always know the answer. It's okay that I have my expertise, but I can listen to other people. Maybe they will fine tune what I thought and it will pivot the solution. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think a crucial ability that we lost as we grow up is the ability to ask questions. And I think people don't feel comfortable asking questions because maybe they would think I'm stupid, I'm not good enough. So usually a lot of people play the game, okay, do with the head, but don't understand really the solution, the offer. And I think this is part of being humble and being present and having self-esteem and being okay with not knowing all the answers. And it's okay to ask questions. I think questioning things can create more understanding and creativity and show more patterns that we didn't see before. So I think it's a crucial ability that we need to nourish. What do you think about it from your experience?
It's clearly a critical ability, and it's important in a larger group, and it's important as we're kind of making decisions about, for example, what we'll focus on next. I'll share with you a change in the nature of the question that I was asking about 2 years ago, which led to this book. I started with a sabbatical to spend some time with my family and contribute more to the community after really having been heavily engaged in some intense work and having been heavily engaged with some needs related to family and friends. And then I took a bit of a step back. And at some point, I asked myself a yes-no question, and that is, should I write this book? And then I got to what I consider to be a more impactful question, which was, when would be a better time to write the book? Mm-hmm. And when I asked that open question, I had a simple answer to it, which was never. There's never a better time to write the book. I'm going to do it right now because I feel a sense of mission. So, and that gets to a why question. Well, why write it? And for me, it was, because there's a gap in the marketplace. I don't see people writing about this. And yet I know a lot of people personally who are in the middle of it and they're succeeding a lot. They're sometimes making preventable mistakes. I made plenty of those too. And if we have a guidebook, then maybe that will help some people. So it's for achievement, but it's also for stronger relationships. And in addition to creating stronger relationships while affecting change, still, I knew too many people who were burning out, who were saying it's just exhausting because they either did not place boundaries on their own time, or kind of health took a backseat or whatnot. And I was like, this is really interesting work. It's really a privilege to work with these types of people. And if you leaven, the hard work and the innovation with a commitment to health, then you can feel fulfilled while you're doing this. And so I wrote the book to help with achievement and relationships and fulfillment. So I had the when and the why, and then I had to figure out how, which was another set of questions. Coming back around to what I thought of first when you mentioned this, and that is this idea of open questions, of saying how, and then opening that up to a team and exploring. And usually there are more layers there. And sometimes people have all the answers top of mind. They just weren't quite ready to share those. Sometimes they have the top layer of the answers, but a conversation and asking these questions leads to going deeper than either you or the other person ever has, which leads to some of the most important advances.
Amazing. I couldn't agree more. I think it's really crucial. And if I need to summarize the conversation, and then I'll ask you for the last question, it's actually being able really to create this space to tap into ourselves and ask ourselves tough questions sometimes, and to really listen to the needs of the environment. And what you said, usually, startups and creative solutions are emerging from a need that don't have a solution. As you said in my book, I understood there's no solution for this challenge, and I have a lot of experience, so I wanted to bring this value to the environment, to the people. Entrepreneurs usually develop a product or service that they encountered as a challenging need. They don't have a solution, right? So I really love to see the path of each and every one, how we got to this product or service. And again, I think coming back to the space is creating the space, asking questions. And sometimes we're so stressed out and burnout, so we can't bring our best self to the workplace, right? And sometimes the ability to get off the train, to say, okay, I'm not going on this train anymore. I need to pause. I need to go to a vacation, 2 weeks in the Himalayas, I don't know, in Thailand, Nepal, whatever works for you. And take this time with yourself, ponder. They're not to do anything, and not to be busy. And I think it's really a crucial element, especially for entrepreneurship, because usually in the corporate world, in organization, as you said, there's a lot of burnout and stress, and people get to a place that they don't have what to bring to the environment because they don't have themselves, they lose themselves. So my 2 cents is always pause in a few months to ask yourself, am I in the right direction? Am I feeling good? Do I have energy? If not, dare to take even a day or two vacation in order to reflect and ponder and meditate and have this time for yourself to come with a clear mind and energy.
Yes. That's right. You're touching on something that to me is so important. And it also is connected to self-awareness. And that is, for every distinct strength, there's always the possibility that there's a weakness or a risk attached to it. In the case of action orientation, which entrepreneurs typically have a great deal of, it's easy to be so connected to the action orientation that you forget to slow down. And if you have a value judgment associated with this really important strength that you have, let's say taking action is good, then sometimes you might underestimate the power of that reflection to ensure that you are able to do your best work and that you're able to be fulfilled and help other people be fulfilled while doing it.
That's so true. Louis, before we need to wrap up, is there any question that I didn't ask you and we want to share with our listeners?
I think we've covered a lot of ground here. If I were to pick one, it would be about the value of entrepreneurship and why it's essential for sustained innovation. What I found is that, some companies are really good at this. Let's say Amazon, and I'm not really making a value judgment on the companies overall, but if you look at a company that has gestated a business and then another business, then another business, that's one example. There are many others. They just have a systematic approach to innovation because they know that their future strength lies in creating new businesses and opportunities. And there are other companies that are so focused on operational needs that they don't build that in. The companies that don't build in the innovation capabilities are the ones that are most exposed to medium-term and long-term weakness. And the reason this is important is because if you honor the entrepreneurs in your company, those are the people who are going to help you adapt to change. They're also the next generation of leaders. They're the people who, if you give them an opportunity, they grow. And then they grow again so that they can not only deliver solutions for customers, but also live the values of the organization. In addition to that, they can be catalysts for the success of entrepreneurs because they recognize that within the company, you don't have all the answers, but there are people outside. And if you build some strategic partnerships, that's when a lot of the magic happens as well. And lastly, small today is big tomorrow. And so it's easy to make the mistake of saying, hey, we've got this big business. It's not worth spending time on these little things over here. I am generally an advocate for selectively and thoughtfully identifying a way to always be nurturing past to the future, because you never know when they will grow into something that is important in its own right or complements the main business, like mobile did for the Weather Channel when we built mobile from something that was very small and insignificant to something that was driving, a lot of the value of the organization.
Amazing. So actually always hold the tension between safe and risk and be open to making the next step and exploring the next step in order for the organization to continue thriving and being the cutting edge. Louis, thank you very much for this interesting conversation. If our listeners want to reach out, where can they find you?
So they can find me at my website, louisgump.com. There's information on the book and, a way to contact me. Also on LinkedIn, you can look up Louis Gump and find more information there. I'm happy to say that the book has been well received, so it's not too hard to find these days.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Karen.
Hope you enjoyed the conversation. You're invited to subscribe to our podcast in order to know when we upload a new episode, and follow us on social media. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care and bye-bye.